You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the trifecta of heavy lifting photography, specifically shipping, transportation, and industrial photography. Shipping photography, you might ask? Well, here's the deal. To be a shipping photographer, you have to be proficient at portraiture, landscape photography, product photography, aerial, architecture, corporate, and a dash of adventure photography. Sure, there are massive container ships, and the people who work on these floating monsters are as colorful as they come. But we're going to let today's guest delve deeper into the specifics. To that, John Harris and I welcome photographers Nick Souza and Todd Vorenkamp to the program. But first, a shout out to Pelican for the support of today's episode. Pelican is the maker of high-performance protective cases and advanced portable lighting systems. Check the link in our show notes for a full range of Pelican products we carry here at B&H Photo. Now, Nick Souza is a California-based corporate industrial photographer who earned his stripes early on as a photojournalist and sports photographer. For over 25 years, he's traveled the world on assignments for companies that include Maersk, CMA-CGM, DHL, Kalmar, Konecranes, Sperry Marine, Terex, and many others. A specialist in maritime transportation, his photographs have been exhibited at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History. His images are bold, geometric, complex, and the stories they tell are grand and intimate in scale. Todd Vorenkamp is a multifaceted photographer, a writer, and an adjunct instructor of photography at Dakota College at Bottineau. He's a graduate of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, a former merchant ship deck officer, and a former U.S. Navy and Coast Guard helicopter aviator. Seems like he can't hold a job. See, everything is former. Todd, what's the story with that? Todd's writing has also appeared in Air and Space magazine, and his photographs have appeared in Maritime Executive magazine, Rotor and Wing, and Vertical magazine, among others. If Todd's name rings a bell, it's because Todd is a colleague at B&H, a frequent guest on the show, and a senior creative content writer for our Explorer blog. Welcome, Nick, and welcome back, Todd, to the B&H Photography Podcast.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on.
It's terrific having you. Let's start with the boring stuff. Well, maybe not so boring. You deal with a lot of crazy stuff, and safety has a big issue. You often work in and around vehicles and machinery of mind-boggling scale. Now, you no doubt take safety measures seriously, but are there any measures that you take that go beyond the usual OSHA, helmet, vest, gloves, and boots safety measures?
Not so much. It's the fact that you bring up safety is really kind of, it's something that you'd think would be obvious, and it is for me, but the clients just take it so seriously. And the biggest reason is, on a container terminal, accidents happen, but they don't have to. But every time I'm out there, and everyone that works out there, there's a very real possibility of someone getting killed, which sounds kind of ominous, but it's just like what you mentioned with the scale of the equipment and what happens. It's just a possibility. And as far as that goes, I've just have so much experience with this, and I know what questions to ask, and I know where I can be and where I can't be. And my head is just always on a swivel as far as knowing, what's happening around me in the environment to make sure that I am safe. And one of the things that you might not think about regarding safety, but I actually think about it more than just, the personal harm aspect of it, is I have to be super aware that everything I'm photographing is showing a safe practice, or it's completely unusable.
That's because if there are workers that are not wearing helmets or goggles or something that has to be in that area and it just shows up in the picture, you're right. It's useless to you. It doesn't matter how safe you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you had otherwise good photos kind of ruined because some were way in the background? Because the photos you take, some of them, the scale is giant. I mean, you can't control a person who's 400 yards away. But things happen within that frame. I mean, is that something that you can control at all? I mean, this may be a bigger issue of how you set your controls and how you handle your shoots. But
Yeah, actually, because I've been burned in the past about things like that. So yeah, I'm super aware of what's going on in the environment. And sometimes if I know that I'm going to have workers that are going to be way in the background and possibly visible, I'll say something to a supervisor and just ask them to all put their helmets on. I mean, these days, most people they're going to have it on, and especially now, I'm noticing the regular just construction hard hat is kind of uncomfortable, and what people are switching to are the climbing style helmets.
Hmm.
So a lot of people now are. It's not so much an issue as it was before, and it's usually overseas where it's an issue. But here in the States, they really know that they need to be wearing all their personal protection equipment.
If you're in a situation or location or a country where you may not be completely familiar with all of the specific regulations, or because it could be just a weird technology you're photographing, do you ever have somebody come along who knows this stuff better than you to make sure that these things don't happen? Because then, I mean, you know a lot, but again, there are certain things you just won't know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I having client support with me on especially in a port environment is just crucial sometimes, because all they do is pick up a radio and get something done immediately. And they're also helping me with kind of securing my surroundings to make sure where I want to be is safe, even though I may know, like you said, I may feel like it's safe, but yeah, I mean, there may be a different traffic pattern that I'm not recognizing or something. So yeah, it's always something different. So having that support for me just makes a huge difference and allows me to get the kind of images that I have.
what do you bring personally, to the site, in terms of your own safety gear? Do you have a set of things that you have for the regular, or is it different and they often supply it?
No, I have my own stuff, but they will. That is kind of a standard thing. They will supply personal protection equipment at shipping terminals. If a visiting VIP or whoever, you absolutely have to wear a hard hat and a safety vest. And typically, the hard hat would be just required underneath something that's overhead. But a lot of terminals now, you just have to wear the hard hat all the time. So yeah, and steel-toed boots. So I have all that stuff, and it's 100% requirement to even set foot out of an administrative office at a terminal. As soon as you are on the actual terminal itself, all that equipment is required.
But what about, in ways to protect your camera gears, or gear we may not think of when it comes to, safety measures, or keeping your camera safe?
Not anything specific. Kind of my main thing. It's kind of like a running theme with me that every piece of equipment I have, or had at some point, has multicolored paint scratches on it from banging against railings or containers or ships. So I try to just be efficient and light. I mean, it's really hard. Some of the cranes, they all have elevators, but a lot of times to get to that elevator, you're either climbing up a really narrow vertical ladder, or there's staircases with railings. So it's super easy to bang stuff around. So
Yeah.
I try to just keep things simple and just use like a fanny pack, or carry just two bodies. And I sometimes I'll have an assistant with me if I need a lot of stuff, because yeah, it's super easy to bang stuff around. So as far as safety with the gear.
What's your bag choice?
God, I have so many. I think right now I'm using an old low pro fanny pack, and I have a lot of think tank stuff as well.
Yeah. And Todd, can I throw these to you?
Sure.
When you're at a manufacturer site, or a shipping site, what's your experience been with safety and helmets and gear?
I actually, people are in generally pretty safe. While you guys were talking, I was thinking of a story. I was photographing at a factory once, and a forklift was driving towards me, and I raised my camera to take a picture, and the guy stopped the forklift and said, like, "Don't take a picture." He put his seatbelt on, and then he gave me a thumbs up, like, now you can take a picture.
Yeah.
I bring my own PPE too. I mean, there's always loaner gear, but if you're familiar and comfortable with your own stuff, that's helpful. I wear a surveyor's vest instead of like a mesh safety vest because it has a bunch of pockets for lenses and gear and stuff.
We're talking safety, but there's another thing that I've been thinking about, and that has to do with security. Now, I know, Nick, specifically, you've been shooting for over 25 years, so you've definitely seen a shift. I know I used to shoot commercially and fly all over, and I've worked in ports and on ships, and it has to be a lot tighter than it used to be. It never has been easy, but are there certain security issues that you got to deal with right now that have made your job harder, or is it just a matter of just a little bit more difficult getting around and through the door?
Um, yeah, it's kind of different everywhere. Like where I live in Southern California, and because of who I work for, the access is a phone call, and I have what's called a TWIC card, a transportation worker ID card, which every longshoreman, anybody that works for a terminal operator, and anybody involved with the port usually has one because that's what gets you access. It used to be literally your driver's license. They look at your ID and you get on. But with that card, that's kind of the ticket to be able to get on. And depending on how the different terminal operators or port personnel feel about you, they'll let you do your own thing. You don't necessarily have to be escorted. So what's different though, like in other states, like I've worked in Baltimore a lot, and they're complicated. You you have to go to a special office every day with your TWIC card, get a day pass, and that like expires within certain hours, and you have to go through different security checkpoints to actually get into a terminal. So yeah, all that is new, and security. I would say it's a toss up between safety and security, what the most important theme for the industry is, because they're both taken extremely seriously.
And Nick, how did you get the card?
Oh, it's easy. You could get one. They- you basically, it's like getting a TSA pre-check. They do a little, whatever precursory background check. You pay $125 and get fingerprinted because everybody in the industry has to have them. Every truck driver has one. So it's not some exclusive thing. It's just, it's kind of more of just a requirement. I mean, the biggest thing for me is because of who I work for and who my clients are. That guarantees the access. The TWIC card is more of like a formality, but like
Right,
I said, in
right.
a lot of places where a smaller port, like for example, LA and Long Beach are huge complexes where like San Diego is really small. And I have a client there that I just drive through the gate and I can just go all over the place and do whatever I want because they know me, and it's not particularly crazy like it is, at the bigger port complexes. So
Do you find you get the better pictures when you're able to have a little freedom and get lost in a port for a bit and just shoot, or when you're under the gun?
It depends. I mean, I like that aspect sometimes, but it depends on what I have to do because, like I said before, when I have somebody with me that can, make things happen immediately, because nothing happens immediately. And that's why I always tell clients when they say, oh yeah, we just need a few hours here and there. And I'm like, well, you end up waiting around forever and trying to get the right person to help you. Like for example, like I go up in cranes all the time, and that requires assistance. Even though I know how to do it, very rarely do they say, "Oh, just go up and go." I have to wait for the right moment. I have to wait for a mechanic to come and help me. And if I have, someone that's along with on the client side helping me, they get on the radio, they make a phone call, whatever, and it happens, rather than me, wasting a bunch of time having to call three different people and get back.
The whole TWIC thing is a post 9/11 measure for security. Back before 9/11, the ports were a little bit more accessible to the crews, the workers, all that stuff.
It hasn't happened to me recently, but I do a lot of things where I'm shooting like outside the actual port terminals, just around the complexes. There's rail activity and truck activity, and there's things I need sometimes. And there's been a few times where, I've been shooting from a parking lot, and I've had a black Suburban full of guys in SWAT gear roll up and ask me what the heck I'm doing, which that it's been a while, but that was the type of security that, threats that people thought, the ports are vulnerable. And,
right.
But what I would just, all I have to do is tell them, what I'm doing and who I work for, and show them a twig, tell them I work for one of the ports, or I'm doing some of your civic client, and it's fine. But that isn't so much the case anymore, but they do take it really seriously. One of the things, like, a lot of people try to fly drones around the port, and that's something that it's not permitted, and you're definitely taking a big risk. There's cameras everywhere, so it always amazes me when I see pictures over the ports with a drone that's just somebody messing around, not someone that actually got the permits and all the insurance that you need, because they take that super seriously also.
Well, we're right at drones now. I thought we'd talk about that a little bit later, but
I would imagine that drones have been a huge advance as far as photographic tools for what you do.
Actually, it's the exact opposite.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Okay, we'll clarify that if you may.
Alan, I threw you under the bus on that one. Sorry.
I know.
No, that's okay. Look, you know what? I'm taking it for the team. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to burst your bubble, but don't feel alone, because every single one of my clients, I have to do the same thing to them, because I mean, they're great, and I don't have one. I hire pilots and camera operators.
I thought you were going to tell me you have helium balloons and a lawn chair that you launch from.
That works too. One of those parachutes with the propeller on the back of it.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So how do you what's the deal with this now?
Okay, so here's the thing about drones. They, clients all the time ask, oh, and what we want drone. Even though I don't have the amount of hours that I'm sure Todd has as a military aviator, but I have a lot of hours in a helicopter. So when drones got popular, I was thinking, oh, this is kind of cool, but I realized that as far as the shipping industry goes, their limitations don't work for me. And the biggest one is restrictions. If you're shooting over a port, you have to have a lot of permits, and there's a lot of red tape and hoops you have to jump through with the port authorities, and it gets expensive. So you're not saving any money. Clients kind of think, oh, helicopter or drone's going to be cheaper. But if you're having to hire the right type of pilot and a camera operator, all the extra insurance, all the permit process that the ports require, it actually factors out to sometimes being more expensive. And then on top of that, for me, if I'm in a helicopter, I could do whatever I want. I can fly as high as I want, low as I want. I mean, and I'm working in your area, in New York and New Jersey. It could be a little tricky sometimes, because Newark Airport, sometimes, depending on the controller that's working, could have certain ideas about where you can go and where you can't go. But I could use every lens I have, from 14 millimeter to 500 millimeter, shoot verticals. So, and not to mention be up in the air for 2.5, 3 hours. So it's just, for me, the range element, the permit process, and just the fact that I feel like I could do much better with my gear than a drone camera can. I always steer clients away from it. However, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I've actually shot from helicopters often. I used to joke around, my favorite tripod is a Bell Jet Ranger.
Yeah, exactly.
And no, true. With the right pilot, I mean, it's amazing what you can do in the air. It really is. They are amazing tools. And yeah, doing that with a drone is a little bit more awkward and everything else. And it's harder to change a lens. No two ways about that. Are the permits and permissions that you have to get to fly a drone any different from getting in with a helicopter?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing you need for a helicopter. If I want to go fly over the port in an hour, I mean, it is a courtesy sometimes. Because I know some of the port pilots, both in LA and Long Beach. If I'm shooting a vessel coming in, I'll call the pilot station and tell them like, hey, we're going to be buzzing over you guys all the way in. So,
Right.
that just so you know, and you see this helicopter, but I work for the Port of Long Beach, and they like to just let their security know if that there's going to be a helicopter. If I'm working over a terminal, there's going to be a helicopter over the terminal. But yeah, it's a piece of cake. That's what's great, and you just follow basic FAA rules. And Todd can probably speak better to this. I'd be really curious to hear some of his thoughts about helicopter, because I definitely have strong opinions about it, because like you can't just go up with somebody that has never been with a photographer or a videographer in the air, because even though I have just tons of experience doing it, that's the first thing I ask if I'm in a new area and have to fly with someone, like, how many hours do you have flying photo missions, or do you know the specifics about what I need to do. So I'd love to hear Todd's thoughts.
Yeah, Todd, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, no, it was always easiest to put the helicopter where I needed it for a photograph when I was actually flying the machine, instead of telling people where to go.
That's because you never had a good pilot, Todd.
I flew with some good ones, but sometimes it's actually hard to communicate. Like I would actually fly the aircraft to where I needed it and tell the co-pilot, like, hold it here, instead of trying to do it verbally. But if you look at Nick's photos, you can tell that he's using a quote unquote real camera, not a little camera strapped to the underside of a drone.
There was a huge difference. Absolutely.
The detail, perspective, all that stuff that you just can't get with a drone. And I'm sure a few years from now, just like the smartphone camera is going to get better and better, drone cameras are going to also get better and better. But there is a definite advantage to flying with a quote unquote real camera.
Yeah, some of the shots that I was super proud of, because they were hard to get. I see them every other day on Instagram, especially people that live in Europe. I mean, Rotterdam is one of the world's largest ports, and most of the biggest ships of the world go there. They see stuff that I don't necessarily I'm going to see in Southern California or on the East Coast, and they can just fly right off the beach and get these really cool bow shots that I had to fly 5 miles offshore and have the helicopter turn sideways and crab backwards with this ship sailing right at us. And I mean, it was super hard to get. Shot it on Chrome, and now it just that kind of picture, everyone has it. So like, I'm glad Todd recognized what my photos look like, because I really do try to make them look like they're not shot with a drone.
It's rare that you find a container terminal that's not co-located with an airport, especially in the U.S., because it's all part of an intermodal system. But and that creates a lot of challenges for airspace usage. And if you're just an average Joe breaking out your DJI drone, you probably aren't allowed to be flying anywhere near that container terminal, just for the fact that a airport's right next to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've run into that too, where I've hired people. And like I said, I do use them once in a while if it's the right project. And typically for me, that's something where it's a warehouse or an intermodal yard where, we need to be low. And that's one of the things I didn't mention about the drone also. Legally, you can only fly at 400 feet. So that's, for me, I like to be low in a helicopter, but there's plenty of times where I need to go, all the way up to 2,000. So in a drone, I mean, you can bypass the software and people do it, but flying a little thing that's not much bigger than your hand at 1,500 feet seems a little bit crazy to me. So yeah, I've used them
on the West Coast. It's crazy. Here in New York, just hold my coffee.
Hey, I've never seen more helicopters in my life than when I do assignments around New York, New Jersey harbor.
I know.
Like what Todd was saying about airports. Yeah, I had an assignment in Texas where I hired a local guy because we needed to get these shots of this intermodal yard, and it was right on top of this logistics park airport. and the drone won't even take off. We actually had to write and get FAA permission to get it done. But that was a situation where, we needed video, and a helicopter could have done it, but it would have been overkill because it would have had to be so low. And so, yeah, for when the project is low and tight quarters, and you really want to get in super close, drones are amazing for sure.
Looking at your work, I'm going to point out another thing that would probably be a negative in terms of using a drone, and that is that most all of your photographs are extremely tight compositionally, and getting those kind of tight compositions flying remotely, I think, would probably frustrate the heck out of you, because you bring a lot of what you're photographing is just so tight, where just a slight move one way or the other and it's not the same picture anymore. That's how tight your compositions are, and that to me would be a frustrating item.
No, absolutely. That's true. I mean, that's why and Todd kind of mentioned it with being in a helicopter. Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's just giving just slight commands to get exactly what I want in the frame, whether it's, in a corner or something in the foreground. And that's what's so nice about having a great pilot. I mean, I definitely have my set of commands, and I used to feel what Todd was feeling, like I frustrated that I couldn't really get the pilot to do what I wanted. And now after, a really long time, and most recently, maybe the last couple of years, I feel like, because I've flown so much in the last couple of years on projects, I really kind of nailed it down to like what type of commands I can tell the pilot so they really get it, so I can be exactly where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Communication.
Yeah.
And Alan, I liked your point, because I wanted to talk about the composition of Nick's images as well. And, the angles, the efficiency, the complexity, the colors, all that's there. And I was kind of wondering, it seems to fit perfectly with the type of photography you're doing. So did one come from the other, or was your style kind of always like this?
Yeah, I think my style, and I was thinking about this the other day, that there's a couple people that I know either, unconsciously or consciously influenced me. I mean, for sure, a name you guys know, Jay Maisel.
I was just
And
going to say it.
yeah, I mean, are you guys familiar with Arthur Meyerson?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that
I am. Yes.
yeah, he was, when I was a newspaper photographer in the 80s and early 90s, seeing that kind of work, and with the color and the composition, and that he was doing stuff for different companies, that was influencing me. And I just thought, like, that was just the coolest thing. That's what I want to do. When I actually had the opportunity to photograph the shipping industry for the first time, I realized, wow, this is, this fits my style and my aesthetic, and it's just like such a complicated, fascinating industry with all this color, and there's so many stories to tell all the way through it, that this is kind of it.
What I find extremely interesting is that you use a wide variety of lenses, from extreme ultra wide rectilinears, like probably 14, 15 millimeter lenses, to extremely long, 300, 400, and it looks like longer than that. And you have a very good handle on both of them for filling the frame and using them the way they're intended to be used. What do you feel more comfortable with, wide angles or telephotos? Even though I know you use each of them to get the shot that needs to be done, but what do you have more fun with?
Um, I think I was always kind of a telephoto guy, but then when I got it, because back from being a photojournalist, I mean, I do both, but I definitely like telephoto, and from a sports background, I enjoyed the super tight crop filling the frame, coming from a transparency film background where, get it right in the camera. You're not gonna crop. You want it to be right there when you're looking at it. So when the editor sees it, like that's the image. So, but then in the shipping industry, when I started getting into that, the stuff was so big. So like
And in tight quarters, no less.
yeah, I mean, I'm realizing, like, a lot of times just, a 70 to 200 is too much. So I started kind of pushing to see like how tight I can shoot with how long of a lens. And at first it was really hard. And now, and you just start seeing differently. Now, I mean, I use my 200 to 500 all the time, and it just lets me see a little bit differently. But then I can, pick up the wide glass and get an overall or see something different that where I want like all the corners and there's detail and interesting stuff happen. I just kind of like let the scene determine what I'm doing, but I'm always mixing it up on shoots because I want to give the client a variety. I mean, it gets used for all kinds of things, and they need room for type and all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah. One of the things you're quite good at is ultra wide angles, especially with, again, really large things in tight quarters. You have no choice often. And the wider the lens, the easier it is to completely distort whatever it is you're photographing and totally change the shape and form of what it is. And you seem to have a pretty good handle on keeping that under control. There are times, obviously, you can't, and keystoning is inevitable, but you seem to be able to bend the lens is what I calling it to get it to fill the frame right and still have everything represented properly.
yeah, it's angle and just experience, just knowing. Like it's funny. I think it's because I've been doing it for so long. Some of the images I'll get to a shoot and I'll see something and just know like what lens I want to use, and it's because also clients for the most part don't want to see images that are super distorted, and that's easy to fix. I mean, it's one thing if it's going to be, just for fun or something that, maybe I'll use for stock. I don't know, but yeah, the distortion. I don't like the distortion either, and having a ship's bow that's looking crazy because the lines are all over the place or not having straight vertical lines, which sometimes you can that's going to happen no matter what, even with like a 24. But yeah, I'm super aware of horizons and tilted lines, all that, just because I don't want to spend a ton of time, in Lightroom fixing things.
Mm.
But sometimes I will have to straighten a horizon, or I'll play with a vertical line a tiny bit if it's easy, but I'm not going to go crazy.
I'll never forget the time I used to do a lot of boating photography, and I finally had enough money to buy a 20 millimeter lens for my Nikon, and I went out and shot a boat, and I had great time. It was phenomenal. The pictures I took were outrageous, and we laid the pictures to slide down the light box. And I remember the art director looking at me and says, "What the hell are you thinking?" He says, "Call him up and shoot it again with the bright lens, would you please?" It's very tempting, but I think anybody who's thinking about these things, yeah, you could make some real artsy pictures, but it might really tick off the client when they see what you did to their products.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's a cliche, but I'll still shoot it plenty of times where I'll stick a camera, right on top of the lines, so there's this forced perspective, or underneath the lines, so a rope looks like it's just gigantic leading into the ship, and sometimes
That's a design element,
yeah,
though. That's what it
exactly.
is.
But it can look kind of weird. It depends on the client though. Some of my clients, they like more abstract, or something that's a little bit less literal. It just depends on what the project is for. That's why a lot of times, I just do a little bit of everything, because I sometimes when I go out and do these shoots, it's just maybe for the files or something. So I never know what it's going to be used for, and I'm looking for all kinds of stuff, because it could be used throughout the year for different projects.
Mm-hmm.
Todd, some of your work in this sphere I've seen, and it's you shoot in black and white at times. You use wide angles. You really do make some abstractions out of the size and the shapes of giant pieces of metal and ships. What's your kind of setup when it comes to lenses, and what's your thought on bringing in abstraction when necessary?
When you're talking about container ships or merchant shipping, there's this enormous scale that rarely gets translated in a photograph. I don't think people realize how enormous these ships are, and how expansive a container terminal is, and how large a container crane is. You can see it in the photos and you can kind of get a sense of it, but if you're not looking for the details to give that scale, you're going to miss it. So
I think that's a good point.
If you're standing next to a ship at a terminal that's 1,000 or 1,200 feet long, you have to shoot it from, you can only back up so far because there's right next to the ship, there's the cranes, and then right past the cranes, you're going to have stacks and stacks of boxes. So if you're backed up to those boxes, you have to shoot wide angle because you're photographing something completely enormous, and you're going to get distortion from that. But if you look at some of Nick's aerial photos, and when you go overhead, you can kind of change up the way you're conveying the subject there. So you have to be versatile. You can't just roll out of there with a wide angle or a telephoto and get the shots that you're going to want to get.
Well, maybe quickly, I'm going to follow up before we take a break on this idea of the details, because, as you said, details are necessary to tell the story, to show scale, yet you can't get caught in the details either. So what do you guys think when you're looking, especially if it's maybe for a client, how do you tell their story with details and at the same time keep the scale understood?
I think for me, probably one of the first driving factors is like how visible is their brand? Is it on all the containers? Is it, where is it on the ship? Is it listed on the crane somewhere? So if I'm going to really like tighten up on something, or, find a little minute slice of the operation that could be condensed and still tell a story, I think I'm looking for probably brand first. But then what's driving me to that usually is there color, is there light, is there something that's interesting that's catching my eye that I could isolate on and make a little detail about. And that's where I definitely go back to the Jay Maisel influence, where like I'm a huge fan of gesture. that for me, especially when I'm shooting workers and people, it's like it's so key that they're doing something that looks interesting.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, more industrial and corporate photography with Nick Souza and Todd Vorenkamp. I'm going to talk about big boats and photographing people and environments and all the good stuff. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back. Todd, a question for you. You've done a lot of long-distance sailing and photography on boats. Any kind of special precautions you take or gear you take with you, and any thoughts about shooting long-term from a boat?
There's no prescribed gear for shooting on a ship. The most interesting part is that when you're living on a ship, that becomes your entire world. So if you're in the middle of the ocean on a container ship, even though it's a gigantic container ship, like the last one I was on was 980 feet long, but that's your entire planet is that 980 feet long, or 980 feet of ship plus the water around it. So you suddenly become limited as to your photographic subject matter. You can of course photograph the horizon, clouds, sunset, sunrise, waves, things like that. But the ship itself becomes very static. Like if you are at B&H in New York City, you can walk outside and shoot millions and millions of different subjects, from bridges to the river to taxi cabs to buildings to museums, all that stuff. But on a ship, it's containers, ground tackle like the anchors, the mooring lines, things like that, the superstructure, and whatever else is laying around.
So what do you do?
So
You turn toward abstraction and you turn toward details, or do you tend to
He
try
has a
to open
selfie
the
stick that he
scale
holds over the rail.
get in the horizon?
no, I just do selfies.
No, actually, you're bringing up some very interesting thing because, we're thinking about regular boats and ships, like especially cruise ships. There are places and open areas for people because it's meant to be a social area. But these ships are not social environments. These are boxes. These are floating crates, essentially.
Right.
So you really don't have much in the way of vantage points, I guess.
Yeah. So this goes back semi-related, but when I was in the Navy, I was on a 7-month cruise on a supply ship, the USS Rainier, and I was taking pictures of around the ship, taking pictures of the helicopters that were coming and going, taking pictures of the ship from the air and stuff. And after a few months into that 7-month cruise, I think my photography was getting fairly stagnant because the subject matter never changed. It was the weather was the only thing that changed.
Right.
And so I was sent a book on a Kodak book called The Art of Seeing, where it basically teaches you how to see the world creatively. And all of a sudden, even though that ship was 750 feet long, even though my planet was 750 feet long when I wasn't flying off of it, I discovered a million other photographs that were there to be had. And that's pretty awesome, especially in the days of digital, where you can take pictures of a rusty scupper or a coil of line, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you haven't lost anything. So, but going back to the whole subject of scale, when you're actually on a gigantic container ship, it's nearly impossible to convey the size of that ship. Even taking photos down the tunnels that run below the main deck passages that are on the side of the ship, or taking photos down the side of the ship, it's literally impossible to convey to people how large those vessels are.
You happen to have an advantage, at least when you were working in the Navy, that you could just kind of fly up and over that
fly
ship.
off the ship.
Yeah. I mean, did you actually take photos from when you were working, as a helicopter pilot? Did you literally pass it over to the co-pilot and have him do a swing around or something?
No, we definitely did a lot of aerial photos of the ships and like all the ships in the battle group, stuff like that. It was great fun to be able to do that. And I mean, that's one of the benefits of being an aviator in the Navy, is you have the ability to get off the ship every once in a while.
And did you have approval for that, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, nobody cared. Actually, the ship loves, or the captain and the XO, they love the fact that when I was flying, they had a cameraman, a photographer in the air. They didn't have to send the ship's photographer up with us because they knew I was bringing back good stuff. So it was a bonus to them.
What about at night with the size of the ships? I can imagine, obviously the movement and the vibration is somewhat limited, but there still must be a lot of movement. And how does that affect especially if you're long exposures and at night? I mean, was that even a possible image for you at that time?
It's possible if you're willing to accept that nothing will be sharp. So
it's if you want to get creative results, it's great.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
If you went to the port of LA, Long Beach, or the port of New York right now, and there's a 1,200-foot container ship tied up to the dock, if you took a 10-second exposure of the side of that ship, it'll be soft. That boat is actually moving, even though it's at a dock with no wind, just from the nature of it. So when you're at sea, you won't necessarily feel the ship moving too much, but you'll definitely see it in a photograph. So you can take a photograph of the ship itself and get it relatively sharp, but everything that's not attached to that tripod is moving on you. So I try to do star photos because, in the middle of the ocean, you have the world's darkest skies, period. And you see amazing skies, but you can't do astrophotography off a ship.
Not even with an iPhone?
Not even with an iPhone.
Oh, gee. What about a gimbal? Would a gimbal help you in a situation like that? Or any kind of dampening devices? I don't know.
Mount? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as we look towards the future with ISO capabilities going off the charts and gimbals getting better and better, you might be able to like stand on the bridge wing of a ship and do a 2-minute long exposure of a deep sky object or something. But today, I don't think they're going to hack it. Even, like when I do astrophotography ashore, I'm shooting it through an astrograph, which is a f5 aperture, and I'm usually like ISO 3200, and it's a 60-second or 2-minute exposure. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of movement in that time. You're on a ship that's probably doing between 17 and 20 knots of speed, and it's moving in the waves, and it's pretty challenging. But someday you'll be able to do it.
So, well, one option, I suppose, when you're on a ship and there's not a lot of variation, is to turn your camera to your fellow shipmates or other people that are working and do portraiture. So, I'd like to maybe throw that over to both of you. But Nick, a lot of your work for clients is that environmental portraiture, people at work, whether it be with heavy machinery or in factories or in the ports. Are most of those controlled and casted and set by you, or are you just kind of grabbing those as you're wandering around for a client?
It's a little bit of both. Sometimes I have a few clients that in the shipping industry that are very much focused on their people, because that's kind of what their business is. They don't necessarily own all the hardware and the big metal objects. They just provide the management and the operations expertise. So a lot of times I'm working for those type of people, it is focused on them. So what'll happen is the client will let the local operation wherever I'm going in what city or whatever country, and they'll recruit some people to use. And then it's kind of up to me to figure out, where I want to put them, what I want to have them doing. Do I want to make it just be a environmental portrait, or do I want to simulate a work environment? And then there's also plenty of times where, I just know that to kind of get just the nice package that I want to deliver, I need some people photos. So I'll just either corral people or just talk to people, see what's what their story is, what their job involves, and figure out how I can make some interesting photos of them. And what's challenging is a lot of times some of these people have very, very important jobs that visually are not that interesting. So, I mean, I joke around with clients sometimes, like, how many radios and clipboards can we show in a photo? Because it's that a lot of times that's one of my go-to things, or some sort of electronic handheld device, because it has to, a lot of times I just try to make the background look compelling, and use the composition. I'll create the light. A lot of times I have portable lighting setups and do that. But it's I enjoy shooting the people, because it helps tell the story, and I like hearing about what they do, where they went to school, what their background is, or and if it wasn't for their patience and putting up with all my direction and, oh, let me try this, and let me move the light here, let's have you come over here, they give me so much of their time, and taking out from their daily work environment. I really appreciate that, and a lot of the pictures that I have of the people are because of the people and their patience, and I'm kind of there just pressing the button.
If you have let's say if you have a job that entails both, if you need to get portraiture done, environmental portraiture, and these giant scenes and scales of ships and loading on the ports, will you schedule them in different days? Will you kind of keep one mindset separate from the other, so that you can kind of focus on people one day and then roam the grounds the next, if possible? How do you work?
Yeah. It yes and no. It kind of depends on what's happening with the overall schedule. Like sometimes if I go to a port in a different country or around the country, if I know that I need to kind of cover everything and really get a well represented collection of images of what's happening, and then that vessel is only going to be there Tuesday afternoon from 1 o'clock until 7 o'clock at night or something, then I might just know that like, okay, the next day I can shoot all my people and I don't necessarily need to have a ship in the background. So yeah, depending on the schedule of what's happening, then I'll figure out, locations and what I need to get done based on schedules. But now with, I mean, I'm sure you guys are aware of what's going on in the supply chain industry. Everything's just out the window now. The schedules are absolutely crazy and nothing is going according to plan. So I don't I have some stuff upcoming that I'm going to be doing, and I have no idea how I'm going to do it.
Another part of the scale aspect of container shipping is the size of the crew on these ships. And that's another thing that people have difficulty wrapping their head around, because you'll be on a 1,000-foot long container ship with a crew, and the complete crew is 20 people.
Yeah.
And a similar sized naval vessel will have literally thousands of people on the ship.
And that includes the entertainment. Is that correct?
That includes the band and the guy that's making the ice sculptures. And
actually, I was gonna. That was my next question. I was gonna be, what about cruise ships? Because that's a whole other world that I'm sure they have their onboard photographers. But the things that you said, Todd, apply to a cruise ship as well. I mean, you can't spend time on the deck one night and just expect to capture a good photo of the stars. Is that true?
Totally true. Especially cruise ships are lit up like holiday trees.
Oh yeah.
So Nick, you mentioned some of the clients, and I wanted to bring up that aspect of the work as well. Can we talk a little bit how you developed this line of work as your niche? I mean, and how the clients have kind of spun from one to the other.
It started out from a neighbor of mine worked at a shipping terminal, and this was before 9/11, and I was just finishing up my newspaper photojournalist career, and I went to work with him one night and shot some photos, and I just thought, wow, this is super cool. And I through some other mutual friends met some people in communications at the port authorities here, and started doing work for them, and then realized like, okay, I really like this. I want to be a corporate industrial photographer. And I was working in some other industries, but I mean, honestly, I wanted to travel. And because this industry was global, I realized, yeah, I want to go to the Panama Canal. I want to go to Hong Kong. And I started making contact with some of the major lines and that I've been working for some of them for almost 30 years. And I have been um, just constantly researching new avenues of the industry, because there's lots of parts that are connected. There's engine manufacturers and port machinery manufacturers and software manufacturers. So I'm still, even though I have a good client base, I'm always researching potential new clients that would appreciate my experience and what I could bring for them to illustrate their brand.
And do you sell your photos for stock? I mean, do you have like an archive of images that is available that you're able to sell, or do the rights are retained with the companies? How do you usually
Um,
contract that?
no, the majority of my clients are fine with that. I put that language into my contract that I want to have retain the rights to use them images for stock sales. But realistically, the majority of the images I can't, because they have too much branding all over them. But that being said, I where I am able to do it is if the person, the client wanting to buy the images is related to the people I shot the photos for, like engine manufacturers or organizations. Those people, I've been had a lot of success selling photos, because it doesn't compete. The brand doesn't matter, because maybe it's an organization that one of my clients is already a member of. So that's where it usually works.
And do you sell through an agency specifically that you'd like to mention, or do you do it through your own website?
Both. I've been with offset Shutterstock for a long time and had pretty good success. I mean, it's not, I don't submit a lot because it's not not something that I don't shoot specifically for stock. And like I said, some of my images are difficult to use.
Right.
I periodically do get requests for, do I have this or do I have that, or they have a project that they need certain things for. So yeah, absolutely. But that being said, it's super easy to go find shipping images on Getty or one of the other big agencies. But then what happens is typically, and I know you guys have probably seen this, where they look very strange because everything is literally wiped clean. There's no names on the containers. There's nothing on the side of the ship because legally, I mean, you could use the editorial, but legally you can't use, for example, you can't use a picture of a Maersk ship to promote a different company unless they give permission, which they won't unless it's an affiliate of them.
In shipping and in trucking, we're doing away with people. It's becoming driverless. There are trucks with no drivers in them. It's all automated. And if I'm not mistaken, there's at least one cargo ship that does not have a crew on it. If I'm not mistaken, it's all remotely controlled. Are you seeing any of that stuff going on? And is it affecting what you do and how you do it?
I know that there's talk of automated ships, and Todd might know more about this than me because of his actual maritime expertise. But as far as where automation is, it's in the operations at the terminals. There's cranes and there's different types of automated guided vehicles that are driverless. That are some are either monitored by a person at a console, and some are just 100% software guided by magnets in the ground, and they just are programmed to do their thing. Um, what changes for that for me is like those are the terminals where you can't be on the ground because that you'll end up stopping the operation. There you have to be up in a crane or really far back because you can't walk anywhere near those machines because they'll stop. And
Okay.
The Port of Rotterdam was one of the first container ports to go experiment with fully automated systems. And one of the early problems was a seagull would land in front of a container chassis, and everything, like the whole port would shut down because of a bird. But I think last time I was there, it was only the crane operators were the only humans. All the trucks moving the boxes around and the cranes moving the boxes around the container yard were all fully automated.
Yeah, there's a few places with LA and Long Beach. We have two terminals that have different levels of automation, and then you guys on the East Coast have a terminal that actually is one of my clients that I shot a lot of the development when they implemented and delivered the cranes. They have what's called automated stacking cranes in the yard that do everything from but they're remotely controlled. The software does 90% of it, but there's still a human operator monitoring things and making sure.
As far as automated ships are going, I know there's designs and there's concepts for that. I think one of the issues that folks are going to face is like engines are fairly reliable these days, but you still need engineers to be able to effect a repair in the middle of the ocean if there's a problem. Also, you can easily tell a ship to drive from point A to point B using GPS and autopilot, right? But sometimes you're on a container ship in the middle of the ocean and you come across a storm or something, and it's kind of the captain and his experiencers say, like, we need to reduce the RPMs on the engine to reduce the pounding on the ship. And, it's some of that stuff is more experience based and seat of your pants feel for how the vessel is reacting to whatever's going on outside that you cannot first, feasibly program into a computer to figure out. So,
and I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And my question had to do with automated photographers. So when's that going to be?
Not
anyway,
anytime soon, I hope.
We've been talking all about photography for the past almost hour or so, but we haven't talked about the specifics. What cameras and lenses are you using? What's your basic kit consist of? if there's a such thing as a basic kit for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So for me, I switched over. I've been a Nikon photographer since I was a kid. I always every newspaper I ever worked at had Nikon gear. So that's what I had when I was a kid first starting out. So I never switched. But for the past couple of years, I've moved over to Nikon mirrorless bodies, and it's been 100% game changer for me. Just weight savings wise, the stabilization, and one of the biggest things is because I do so much aerial work is being able to not take my eye away from the viewfinder and see the image. And like we talked about before, like what I want to include, what I don't want to include. It just lets me be so efficient. I'm not wasting a bunch of gas because I may need to be up for a long time and get multiple areas, especially in your area and the New York Harbor area. I've had assignments where I'm having to get the ship hitting certain places, and there just isn't time to be messing around, not knowing you have the image and just burning up fuel. So I'm also always have been a huge fan of zoom lenses because I don't like changing lenses anywhere, especially inside of a helicopter or on top of a 200-foot crane.
You don't have
So
the option of getting a little bit closer, moving back a little bit. Sometimes when you're dealing with a helicopter moving at it, however fast it could be moving, and your subject is moving also at its own pace, doing its things,
yeah,
you need the zoom lens
and
to
even
do
if
this
it's
kind of
even if
stuff.
it's static, it's what's amazing is that you can just change your composition and change your point of view instantly. And
Thank you.
it's not like
Yes.
you're being lazy. It's just that you can get a tight detail, tight vertical, and then switch it up and get that overall. And I mean, my clients are always asking for the same things over and over again. Make sure and get horizontals and verticals. Leave room for type.
Mm-hmm.
This might be a cover. This might be that. So like there's no way. I mean, I love it when the purists argue about prime lenses or whatever. And yeah, great. And I if I was shooting things that were simple and relatively static, and I probably would, but I just don't have time to change lenses. So typically I work with two bodies. Um, if I can set one down, sometimes three. Like a lot of times in a helicopter, I'll just have my 200 to 500 sitting on a separate body, but I'm kind of primarily picking up just a, a body that has a 24 to 70 on it and a 70 to 200.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Sure.
And Todd, do you want to answer that too?
Yeah, I agree. Like the zoom lens is the weapon of choice for aerial photography because it's too dynamic of a scene to, be fumbling with switching lenses in the back of the aircraft or in the front of the aircraft, especially.
Especially being the pilot. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I was signing for the aircraft, so I was responsible for the safety of everybody on board. I'd make sure, you make sure your camera bag's in a safe place, never use a lens hood, never use lens caps. All that stuff stays at home because you don't want it, floating around the cabin and getting jammed in flight controls or something.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good point about the lens hoods. A lot of people wouldn't really think about that, but yeah, in a helicopter, you you don't need a lens hood, and it's in the potential of it coming off is and hitting the tail rotor or something. That's something that yeah, you just I will leave lens hoods off and stuff flying around. Like it depends on the type of helicopter, but a lot of the times when and I'm a larger jet helicopter, they'll even though it's not going to move. I mean, I have a huge think tank bag, and sometimes I put it on the seat next to me. They still want you to put a seatbelt through it because you do have the door completely open. And I guess it would take a pretty violent movement for a bag like that to move, but it could happen. So it's definitely better to be on the safer side with that.
I once had an assistant grab the handle of a Halliburton case with all my Nikons in it because the door imploded on us and flew right through, and it happens.
Oh
By
yeah.
the way, another little reason why you don't want to use a shade when you're up in a helicopter is that wind bouncing around inside that little
yeah.
disc. And there's no way you can get a sharp picture. It's like somebody's holding the end of your lens and throwing it back and forth while you're trying to shoot.
No, you're right. And unless you've experienced that or felt it, it's like that's exactly what it is. It's like holding up a sail. I mean, you try to stay out of the wind if you can, but sometimes, like, especially, I do a lot of video out of a helicopter also. And I use a gimbal and a dedicated video camera, not a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. And it's the same thing. You have to stick it in the wind, and it's amazing that the gimbals hold the camera. I cannot believe. And same thing with the mirrorless bodies. I have shot pictures at an eighth of a second from a helicopter that are just tack sharp, and for me, that's worth the price of admission right there. The fact that I could take images that I couldn't take just a few years ago.
Absolutely. Anyway, Nick, it was terrific chatting with you today. Some interesting topics. Todd, nice having you back on the show again. Always great having you back here.
Thank you, Alan.
And if people want to catch up with more of your work and see what else you're doing, Nick, where can they go to?
My website is nsouzaphoto.com, which is my last name, and it's the same thing on Instagram, nsouza.photo. And
that will also be in our show notes, so you could definitely catch up to it from there. And we strongly suggest you do. It's amazing photography. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Todd, if listeners want to catch up with what you're up to, where can they go to?
B&H Explorer blog.
We got a little plug there. Okay, yeah, good.
Or trvphoto.com. Tango Romeo Victor photo.com.
And Todd has a really, really amazing background in photography, and his work is wonderful. Really, really good stuff to check out. And also, we must give another shout out to Pelican for supporting this episode of the B&H Photography Podcast. Check out the link in our show notes for the full range of Pelican products on the B&H Photo website. And if you are not yet a subscriber to the show, just head on over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you snag your favorite shows and sign up. It's free, and tell them Al sent you. And if you're already a subscriber, a few positive words in the comments field is always appreciated by all of us, including our parole officers. Actually, we're joking about that. We do not have parole officers, only John. And again, you can always find us on the B&H Explorer website and on the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group page. My name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you so much for tuning in today.